talk about the draft policies, how we integrated the feedback we heard from phase 3 into them, have a good conversation about those, and then talk about next steps and how, we keep building this transportation plan. And then we finish off with public comments. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Chris to do our intros.
Great. Welcome, everybody. I'm Chris Slett, chair of this working group, former chair of the Transportation Commission. Let's start with staff and the consultants.
Sure. Most of the people on this call are pretty familiar, but I'm Kristen Culkins. I'm the project manager for Arlington's Transportation Future. I've got a great team of staff with me. Let's go with Brian, Allison, and then Aaron and Nate.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Brian Shelton, active transportation planner and deputy project manager.
Hey, everyone. Good to see you this evening. I'm Allison Bullock. I'm the transportation planning manager.
I'm Erin Potter, and I'm doing public engagement for this plan.
And I'm Nate Graham, and I'm also doing public engagement for this plan.
Then we have two consultants with us tonight.
Good evening. My name is David Samba. I'm the consultant team project manager.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nick Adamo, consultant team deputy project manager and transportation planner.
Great. And then let's get into the advisory working group members. Do we have someone from Arlington Neighborhood Advisory Committee tonight? Didn't see anybody. How about Bicycle Advisory Committee?
Yep. Mike Hanna, Bicycle Advisory Committee. I am here.
Good to see you, Mike. C2E2? Commission on Aging?
Hi, everyone. William Way. I'm sitting in for two of my colleagues who are unable to attend, so glad to participate. Thank you.
Welcome, William. Good to have you. Disability Advisory Commission?
Yes, I'm Elizabeth Prio. I'm happy to be here.
Good to see you, Elizabeth. Economic Development Commission?
Hi, Evan Pritchard.
Hello, hello. Fiscal Affairs Advisory Commission?
Yes, hi, it's Claire Noakes.
Welcome, welcome. Forestry and Natural Resources?
Greetings, John Kerry here.
Good to see you, John. Neighborhood Complete Streets Commission?
Aaron Schutz, good to see everybody.
Hey there, Aaron. Parks and Rec? Pedestrian Advisory Committee?
Hi, everybody. Hello. Whoops.
Hey there, Pam.
Hi, Pam Van Hine with the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Happy to be here. Happy to see everybody.
Happy to have you.
I'm keeping my camera off.
Okay. How about Planning Commission?
Hey, everyone. It's Tony Striner from the Planning Commission. It's good to be back.
Good to see you, Tony. Transit Advisory Committee? How about Transportation Commission?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Justin Furman from Transportation Commission.
Great. Good to see you, Justin. All right, with that said, let's talk about meeting procedures real quick. This will be familiar to a lot of folks, but just in case we have any newbies, this meeting is open to the public. Time for public comment will happen at the end of the meeting. During the main portion of the meeting, conversation is limited to just the advisory group as well as the staff and consultants who are here supporting the advisory group. All meeting participants, just keep your devices muted until you're called on by the chair. That's me. If you lose internet connectivity during the meeting, don't hesitate to connect back by phone. The Teams chat is just there for advisory group members who need technical assistance and for members of the public to add your name to the list for public comment, which will be taken at the end of the meeting. The Teams chat is not there for discussion. If you want to provide public comment, don't do it there, do it at the end of the meeting. If advisory working group members wish to be recognized to speak during the course of the meeting, just raise your virtual hand in Teams and wait to be called upon. For members of the public who would like to provide feedback and comment, you'll be called on to speak at the end of the meeting. You'll get 2 to 3 minutes for that, depending on how much time we have left this evening. And if you wish to speak, just put your name in the meeting chat. We'll put you on the list. Lastly, this is a public forum. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. And I will turn things back over to Kristen and the team to talk about Phase 3.
So we hope everyone had a lovely end of 2025, great start to the new year. Some of this is information that we shared at a very high level at our December meeting with the post phase 3 engagement, very high level summary. So things like the engagement by the numbers, that we had 42 days of public comment, 25 events across our open houses, pop-ups, canvassings, and focused engagement. We talked to almost 2,500 people at these in-person events, had somewhere around 270-ish feedback forms filled out, and almost 4,000 hits on the webpage. We shared this last time. It's always nice to kind of recap and remind everybody what we heard. And from that engagement, we got a lot of great feedback and helpful information from the community as we took the draft priority networks, the draft policies, the draft curb lane hierarchies out to people and asked them for their kind of perspectives on them, how they felt about the policies, how they felt about the networks, and what they thought it would do kind of for transportation in the future. From the feedback form, when we asked people about the overall policies and their impressions, people generally had a positive sentiment about them. They thought that the draft policies were pretty good overall, that they were understandable, and that they worked towards improving the overall transportation experience for them. When we asked them kind of what do they think about how they work towards the goals, because the policy's intent is to make sure that the vision and goals that have been endorsed by the board are achieved, people in general had a pretty positive sentiment about the vision and goals being achieved through the policies. The highest sentiments for kind of that very well really kind of hit for equitable and inclusive, livable, safe, and sustainable. And while high, but not quite as high, we still had a lot of support for the reliable and the transparent and accountable policies supporting the vision and goals as well. This is good for us. It means that the policies are heading in the right direction. They probably still need a little bit of refinement. We've shared some of that with you already, and we're going to talk about it later on. But this let us know that the policies in general were really kind of settling and working well for the community as far as working towards the vision and goals. For the impact on the draft policies, their transportation experiences, their modal experiences, people who walk, take transit, and use bike or micromobility thought that there was a very positive impact that these policies would have on their transportation options, on those transportation options. For people who drive, it was about 50-50 on kind of like positive to very positive compared to neutral, negatively you're driving, considering the fact that our plan really focuses on enhancing the ability for people to take transit, walk, bike, because the current network doesn't serve those modes as well. We actually thought it was pretty positive to see that only 24% of respondents thought that the plan itself would negatively or very negatively impact their travel experience. So I think people are seeing that the plan as a whole is still working to make the transportation network work for people, work for our community. And then for freights and delivery, people kind of had a neutral to somewhat positive to very positive perspective on how the draft policies would affect that kind of mode, for lack of a better term. When we went out to the community with the open houses, we had a sticker exercise where people could let us know kind of where they landed with the policies, whether or not they liked them, they thought that we were really heading in the right direction, if some of them needed tweaks, or if like these policies just weren't a priority for them, because we recognize that not every policy that will end up in the plan is a priority for everybody, though they do need to work for the community as a whole. The community strongly at these open houses supported our policy that works to correct historical and existing disparities within the transportation network, as well as the policy that looks at how we reduce single occupancy vehicle trips and emissions through transportation demand management and infrastructure improvements. Those were both 97% of the responses stickers chose those. For our policies on low stress, people focused streets, that was a strongly supported policy at the open houses. For our during temporary disruptions and construction and large events, provide safe and convenient transportation options. A lot of people thought it was getting there. We got a lot of comments about it needing to be a little bit more inclusive about the different types of events and weather that it impacted. But Also strong support for our goal, our policy supporting integrating land use and transportation planning to co-locate growth and development and high quality and sustainable transportation options. People really recognize how important that coordination between transportation and land use is, not only to the success of the transportation plan, but really our community as a whole. And then for the prioritize the reduction and prevention of severe and fatal crashes, people supported that goal. A few people thought it was almost there. They just kind of wanted slightly stronger language about how we wrote that. So when we look at the 23 policies that we brought out to the community, when we were at the open houses, in general, people were pretty supportive of the policies. Some people thought that some of them needed tweaking. They weren't priorities for some people. But in general, people supported the policies. When we think about what we heard from the pop-ups, the open houses, the listening sessions, the online feedback board, overall, people really do support the policies, especially the policy that represents our goal to work towards minimizing single occupancy vehicle trips and emissions. People really kind of commented and reflected on the fact that these policies needed to be supported by data-driven decision-making, and that will really start to show up in the strategies that we create to support these policies. We also heard that there's a general desire for an individual greenhouse gas emissions separate from the single occupancy vehicle trip policy, and that people really recognize the importance of consistent maintenance for our multimodal transportation system overall when we think about our policies. When we ask people about the priority networks, specifically the transit priority network, when we asked people if they thought it would connect them to places across the county, there was a highly general positive sentiment about how well the proposed priority network for transit would impact their ability to get places on transit. Some people, about 50% of people said it would encourage them to take transit more often than they do today if this network were to be realized. About a quarter of people said they're not sure if it would, and similarly for people who it just wouldn't change their decision making. So in general, from this perspective, we see that the network is working towards at least people's perspective of it, serving their transportation needs. Similarly, for the bicycle and micromobility network, I'm trying to add 42 and 60+% of people have a very positive sentiment towards the bicycle and micromobility network, with another 22% of people just kind of being neutral towards the network as a whole. About 16% of people think that it doesn't help them access places that they would like to get to within the county. When we ask people whether or not this would encourage them to bike or scoot more frequently, about 50% of people said yes, this would make it more likely for me to choose to take that mode. 18% of people are a little up in the air about whether or not they'd change their trip making decision. And then 33% of people said no. We didn't break this out into and why no. So is it you already bike and you're going to keep biking, so this doesn't impact your decision to bike? Or are people who are just, they're walking, they're driving, they're taking transit, and that's their mode? And no matter how well we build out a network, they're just not going to change their preference for trip making. It's still good to see that over half of respondents thought that this network would encourage them to take, forms of active transportation more frequently. We also did kind of a math exercise at the open houses, at the pop-ups, at some of our focused engagements where we asked people to put lines on the map about where they currently travel, where they'd like to travel in the future by mode. We didn't disaggregate that into one specific map. It would not be legible, but what we did instead is we looked at those maps and took themes, and a lot of the themes about where people want to go were very similar to what we heard through the feedback form. Is that there's desired transit connections to the Longbridge Aquatic Center, Arlington schools in general, but especially high schools and middle schools. The RB corridor for transit connectivity, more than the Crystal City corridor, really came up frequently in conversations that people want good bus connections to the RB corridor, and that just neighborhoods should be well connected via transit. There is high support for the multimodal transportation system overall, and people really resonated with us and saying that the pedestrians are the top priority when we consider improvements within our right-of-way. That was something that people really appreciated, and they liked knowing that pedestrians, as we start to implement the philosophy and the priorities of this plan will be the top consideration as we do corridor studies, as we do intersection improvements. People also recognize the importance of strong multimodal connections to neighboring jurisdictions. People don't just travel within Arlington, they go lots of places, whether it's for work, to see friends, to recreate, for appointments outside of the county, and making sure that the priority networks that we've developed relate to those interjurisdictional connections is really important to people. We built the networks based off of a lot of what our sister jurisdictions are doing. The transit lines are regional. We recognize that. It's good to know that the work we did is also reflected in what people recognize in their mobility needs. And from the bicycle and micromobility network, people really want to make sure that there are good connections between Crystal City and Aurora Hills to Shirlington and some of those surrounding areas, that they want to make sure that we have good connections between North and South Arlington, and that in general, it's really important to have strong connectivity to schools, metro lines, and major trails within the bicycle and micromobility network. When we consider the curb lane priority, we went out to the community and asked kind of first, we've said that safety and the implementation of the modal priority network should be the top two priorities for the curb lane. And we asked people to tell us whether or not they agreed with that. And on the feedback form from responses, 80% of respondents said that, yeah, that's something I agree with 50% of responses saying they strongly agree that safety and then completing the modal priority network, if the curb lane space is needed to do that, are top priorities. And that was a really strong kind of recognition of those being at the top of our decision making. When we did the curb space activity and we asked people to choose then kind of their next 3 top priorities by kind of development type across the board through low density neighborhoods, high mixed use neighborhoods, garden apartment neighborhoods, and our kind of like lower and medium density residential centers, people think that people access is the most important thing after we've considered safety and the mobility networks, whether that's people getting dropped off by, Lyft or taxi, it's our bus stops, it's the ability to park your bike. People really see that as the next most important use of the space across our different neighborhoods. Things change a little bit depending upon the type of neighborhood you'd go for your kind of second or fourth priority. In our more residential or lower density neighborhoods, people really saw that space as an important opportunity for enhancing the green space within the communities. But in our higher density and more retail active areas, people recognize the importance of good access. So like Amazon deliveries, retail deliveries for restaurants, sometimes trash removal, things along those lines, that kind of freight and delivery use at times, the ability to get your Uber Eats or something that people really see as an important priority for that space. And then the third or fifth, depending upon your counting mechanism, priority for people is parking. People still recognize that parking is something that a lot of people will need access to in order to get to their jobs. So if they're leaving their kind of residential area and they don't have their own personal parking area, parking on the curb is important in those neighborhoods. Similarly, for a lot of businesses, the ability to still have customers park for a short amount of time, access their storefronts, and come back is really important. So in general, there's themes that pop and they vary a little bit by neighborhood. And then what we kind of saw as themes that I've already talked through a bit is that strong support for safety and the priority networks being the top 2 priorities for our curb lane, that people access is a universal priority. Goods access is important in our commercial and mixed use areas, and that greening is a priority in our residential areas. Vehicles traveling, a lot of times we got comments on the side as like conversations happened at the open houses, at our pop-ups, at our listening sessions. People really did kind of express that a challenge of the curb lane is the fact that people, if they can't access it for goods delivery or to park sometimes, but especially goods delivery or pickup, that they'll park in the travel lane, be it a bike lane, a normal vehicular travel lane, and they leave their car. And it makes travel less safe for everybody, for people who are trying to cross at crosswalks, for people who are trying to ride their bikes in the bike lane, and for other drivers who have to try and merge and swerve out of the way so they can continue traveling along the corridor if someone is parked in front of them. And a lot of people see a curb hierarchy as an opportunity to respond to some of those challenging experiences. And as I mentioned, people recognize that parking is still a priority for residents and business owners because of its impact on their ability to get places and also to access service or have customers access their services. High level, from the many ways we engage, in general, people are supportive of the draft policies, the draft modal priority networks, and the draft curb lane uses. They're on the right track. We still need to make tweaks. We still need to get them even better. That's why we did phase 3 engagement, is to figure out what needed some changes. The pedestrian priority is essential to the complete transportation network. People really recognize that if we don't have a safe and comfortable network for pedestrians, we don't have a complete functional transportation network. There's strong support for making sure that as we work to create strategies for these policies, that we have data-driven processes for those. There's strong support for better transportation options that help reduce our dependence on driving across the modal priority networks and from comments we received on policies. And then safety, the modal priority networks, and people access are very important uses for the curb lane after those top 2 priorities. It's a really high level takeaway. We'll have a more detailed engagement summary that comes out. We've got 2 hours today to talk about a lot of things, so we can come back to this if people have kind of specific questions they want to ask. But what we really do want to share is kind of how we used what we heard from phase 3 engagement to help create the latest and greatest draft version of the policies. We did share these on Friday. I hope people have had the opportunity to read them, so nothing is kind of brand new information. If not, we have the opportunity to answer questions as they come up once we get to our conversation point. But quickly, I'm just going to walk through the 23 policies and kind of let you know what changed and why it changed, or maybe a piece of information or two about a policy and comments we got on it. So the first policy, and these were presented in alphabetical order to the communities, and we just kept them in that order, is advance a transportation system that proactively addresses the impacts of a changing climate. In general, we got some comments that was just kind of like, this isn't hitting the spot exactly. It's not resonating with the way we need our transportation system to function as we think about climate change. We thought about that. We talked to, other partners within the county, and we wrote this kind of looking also at some of the information within other planning documents that we have to develop a transportation system that is resilient to shocks and stressors, including weather, emergencies, and the impact of a changing climate. So this is kind of where we see strategies sitting that guide our response when maybe we don't have time to think about the transportation network, or how we create a transportation network that is resilient in times of pressure. The second policy we have is clearly communicate how decisions are made when developing, funding, and implementing transportation projects and programs. It was a generally well-supported policy across engagement. We didn't make any changes. Strategies will be important to making sure that we achieve this policy. Similarly, collaborate with local, regional, state, and federal jurisdictions, agencies, and other interested parties to advance transportation planning and services. People get it's important. We need to work with the state. We need to work with our regional partners on transportation funding. We need to talk to WMATA, VRE, our neighboring jurisdictions. This is core to making sure that transportation in Arlington works well, because it doesn't just end at the county line. Collaborate with other county departments to further mutual goals in the right-of-way. We got some questions about this one, about isn't it something we're just doing anyway? It is, but it's really important to make sure that we put strategies under there as kind of a reminder about the work we're doing, why we're doing it, and what some of those mutual goals are that we're working towards. The next one, as we brought to the community, was correct historical and existing disparities in the transportation system to improve access and the opportunity for community members in the highest vulnerability areas. We added affordability to this after we kind of heard from the community, because if people can't afford to use the transportation network, it's not equitable. We see kind of affordability being our targeted programs like Capital Bike Share for All, subsidized Smart Trip cards, and really assistance for people who need it the most to make sure that transportation is not a barrier to opportunity for them. The next one is something we got a lot of support for from the community. Couple infrastructure investment with transportation demand management to minimize single occupancy vehicle trips and emissions. This was a strongly supported policy. But as we considered it, we really decided that this was two policies. A policy that focuses on infrastructure investment and transportation demand management to minimize single occupancy vehicle trips, because we minimize single occupancy vehicle trips for so many reasons beyond just reducing emissions. We minimize single occupancy vehicle trips because we only have so much space within our right of way. And there are ways that we can move people with less space. We do it because it creates a more pleasant travel experience for a lot of people. People who are walking and biking or taking transit are more likely to stop in our local businesses. There are a lot of reasons why reducing single occupancy vehicle trips is a good thing. One of them is reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but it's not the only reason. So we also created, because we heard and recognized the importance of the transportation network's impact on greenhouse gas emissions, a policy that says reduce transportation greenhouse gas emissions to achieve carbon neutrality with a focus on shifting trips to high quality multimodal transportation options. Because within this plan and the strategies that we're going to create, it's really going to focus on having mode shift happen to help achieve our reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So that's kind of one of the bigger changes that happened. The next policy we went to the community with was create an accessible transportation system for all by eliminating barriers to mobility. In general, we heard a lot of support from this one, but when we talked with the Independence Center and some of the people who, they coordinate with, we really heard that it's not just about creating an accessible transportation system, it's that we need to eliminate the barriers to do it. So we rewrote it to affirm that statement. The next policy that we went to the community with was develop a transportation system that provides essential access during emergencies, extreme weather events, and disasters. That policy has now been kind of co-homed with the first policy, so it no longer exists as a standalone policy. Policy 9, in order, was develop streets as low-stress, people-focused public spaces that foster community connection, economic opportunity, and everyday interaction. We heard a lot of support for this policy. People get it. They recognize that streets are more than just moving people, but it's where community happens, their public space. And because of that, we rewrote this a little bit as we considered the types of strategies we see living under this, like public space activation, public art, our opportunity for parklets, for community activity within the right of way. So now it's develop streets and streetscapes as people-focused public spaces that foster community connection, economic opportunity, and everyday interaction. We added streetscapes since that's such an important component to a lot of the strategies that we think will live here. And we also took the term low stress out because a lot of people really associate that specifically with the bicycle low stress quantifiers. And it was throwing people off about, well, how do we define low stress? And if we're creating people-focused spaces, those are inherently and naturally low stress. The next policy is during temporary disruptions, such as construction and large events, provide safe and convenient transportation options. We got support for this, but we also got comments about how we really need to focus on making sure that these networks are accessible to everybody. There's a lot of challenges that people experience with kind of construction, with MOTs. We rewrote it based off of the feedback that we heard to maintain safe, accessible, and convenient transportation options during temporary disruptions such as construction and planned events. This gives us the opportunity to think about what we do to make sure transportation continues to work for all the different ways people travel when we have these events that we know about that are coming. The next policy we didn't tweak, ensure community members are equitably engaged in transportation decision-making. This is the policy that speaks to making sure that we continue to equitably engage people. It's kind of the stone that this program that we've built for Arlington Transportation's future is built on. How we did our listening sessions, how we've intentionally gone to groups that we know are less likely to have the opportunity to come to us, to make sure that we're hearing from lots of different voices and just not kind of one specific group within the county as we consider the transportation impacts on all of our community members. The next one is ensure long-term viable funding models to plan and finance the improvement and maintenance of the transportation network. We got positive vibes for this one. Everybody recognizes that it's important to make sure that our transportation network is funded. Not a lot of comments on how we should change it. The next one was ensure the safe mobility and access of people and goods in the right of way. A lot of comments we got about this one that it wasn't affirmative enough about the safety of people within transportation and within our right of way, that people felt like the access and the goods really kind of took away from the intent of the policy statement. So we rewrote it to say ensure safety is the first priority in all projects, plans, and initiatives that impact the transportation network. And that way, it's if something's happening that relates to transportation that necessarily isn't on the street, like trails, or happening within a development project that has a public easement in it, that we can make sure that the safety of people who are traveling is considered first when we're thinking about things. The next policy, the next 3 policies didn't really change a lot, got support within the community. Our technology evaluation policy was basically people want to make sure that when we're doing this, we're doing it in a data-driven way, and our strategies will be speaking to that. Similarly, for when we evaluate the progress and effectiveness of transportation plans, projects, and initiatives, people want us to make sure that we're tracking, that we're doing it in a data-driven way and that we report it back out. That's what the strategies are going to focus on. We agree. Foster a safe travel behavior for all users. This one had a lot of support, lots of thoughts about kind of how we do it and the strategies we recommend from the community as far as kind of like educational programs, partnerships with schools, things along those lines. This one, it was a strong supported policy. Safety is important. The next policy, integrate biophilic principles, street trees, and green infrastructure into the planning, design, and operations of the transportation system. We didn't get a ton of comments on this one. I think it's just a lot of people are like, yeah, that's something that we should do as we do transportation planning and work and design. The next, we had strong support for our land use and transportation policy. Really just mostly like, yes, do this. This is an important piece of the plan. The next was maintain a state of good repair and service across the transportation network to support the safe movement of people and goods across the county and region. A lot of people were like, you could make this one more succinct by just ending it at network. And that like the safe movement of goods and people is inferred. We have policies that already speak to the safe movement of people, and that maintaining the state of good repair is really the intent of this policy. We heard that and we made it shorter and more succinct. The next policy is kind of our curb lane policy. We wrote it as manage the curb lane and streetscapes as a valuable and limited public asset, recognizing its importance to safety, mobility, access, commerce, sustainability, and public life. As we rethought kind of our streets and public space policy, we thought the streetscape component really belonged there because this policy will relate to our curb lane hierarchy. It really will speak to what we do with that bit of asphalt between the travel lane and the curb, and not so much what we do with the space behind the curb. And we think this helps clarify the strategies that sit here and work towards this policy, and the strategies that will work with our, streets and streetscapes as people-focused spaces. So that's a small tweak, but we think an important one as we consider to build out strategies that work towards these policies. Home stretch. The next one was prioritize the reduction and prevention of severe and fatal crashes when developing, funding, and implementing transportation projects to create a safe transportation system. We got a lot of comments on this one asking how it was different from the other safety policies. And if anything, people are like, this really feels like it works with the other safety policy. So what we're planning on doing is creating this as a strategy that as we consider safety and transportation projects, the reduction and prevention of severe and fatal crashes is one of the ways that we do work towards that policy. Our next one is support low impact urban freight operations that reduce congestion, emissions, and conflicts with other users within the right of way. We got some questions on kind of like what the intent of this was, what we think we're going to do with this. And this is really a policy that we see strategies about, lower, smaller vehicles, e-bikes, loading docks, curb space management in some ways, policies that or strategies that really kind of speak to making sure that we can still deliver goods to our residents, to our businesses, but that it works well within the transportation system. And as we explained it to people were like, oh, well, then you should be putting delivery in here, because in Arlington, we don't talk about the big heavy freight as much because it doesn't happen. Freight for us is kind of that last 2 to 3 mile connections with our stores and with our people. So we rewrote it to support freight and delivery options that reduce congestion, emissions, and conflicts with other users of the right. We took out low impact because it's kind of redundant, because if we're doing the reducing congestion, emissions, and conflicts, we are creating a low impact urban freight and delivery operations. And then the last policy, and I get to take a break for talking for a second, was use the modal priority networks to advance an interconnected and convenient multimodal transportation system. Generally strong support for this. People saw the modal priority networks. They want them. They think they will make their transportation experiences better. But what they want to see is they want to see them built out. So we heard that and we changed the phrasing from use the to build out the modal priority networks that recognizes the importance of looking at those networks and making them a reality over time for our community. So with that, I'm going to hand this back off to Chris and let him facilitate the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Kristen. I know that was a lot, everybody. So we're going to just divvy this conversation up a little bit, give it some structure. So I'm going to start off. If anybody has any comments or questions about that phase 3 engagement summary, if we want to go back to a slide, go into a little bit more detail on something, that sort of thing. And then once we've addressed those sort of conversations, we're going to go ahead and go slide by slide through the draft policy changes. And just discuss or address any questions that people have or any comments that people have about any of the draft policy changes. So if anything was unclear or you have any comments or questions about the phase 3 engagement summary, just go ahead and raise your hand there for me and we can address that. All right, not seeing any hands there. So let's go to the first slide of the policy changes. Great. Anybody have any questions or comments about the changes here in policies 1, 2, 3, and 4? Go ahead, Claire.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for putting all this together in a way that it's very easy to compare and look at the difference. That's very helpful. The comment I had coming from the Fiscal Affairs Advisory Commission, we were very, we wanted to make sure that to the point that was raised earlier about data-driven decision-making, that was very important, including kind of collecting data on how we get the biggest bang for our financial buck on some of these different strategies. And what I noticed in going through all the policies, both the revised version and the original, is that we didn't really reference data-driven in any of this. And maybe there was a reason, and I'm sorry if I missed it. Okay, I think I'm seeing, and maybe that's more of a strategy, but okay. But I'm just not sure if omitting it entirely, or maybe referencing cost effectiveness or somehow thinking through the biggest bang for the buck, if any of that can be embedded. And this goes to policy 2, but it also could go in policies 14, 15, and then possibly also in policy 23 about how to build out the multimodal network in the most cost efficient way. So that is carrying forward some comments from FAC for what they're worth.
Kristen, did you want to respond to that? I know there was some conversation about data-driven is likely to make its way into a strategy.
It will be in more
or
than one
multiple strategy.
It's really being data-driven is about how we do the work. It's not the policy itself. It's how we make the decisions. It's when we look at all of the information, that's where the data is. If we wanted to put data-driven in this, we looked at 7 or 8 policies where it would start to go in and then it gets very repetitive and it's in a data-driven way. So we think it makes a lot more sense to be articulate with what data we want to look at in the strategies versus just kind of an umbrella data statement in, half a dozen policies. But we agree. It's important. It's how we do this work. It's how we make decisions, and it's how we're going to have a successful transportation plan.
quick follow-up. Is cost effectiveness in your mind the same thing or captured by the how, or is
This is
that?
a policy document. Policy documents are cost neutral. Our cost considerations are
okay.
something that happen through the CIP and how we make decisions later on, but they're not the policy of the plan itself. Important to the county as a whole, but we have different mechanisms already established that do that for us.
Great. Lily, you're up next.
Thank you so much. I mean, I am extremely excited when I opened this document on Friday and I saw policy 6B. I had a little dance as a representative of C2E2 because we got a huge win here for climate. My comment goes to policy 1, and it is related to the two-phase coin in climate and climate changing, which is we're addressing here the adaptation issue, but not necessarily the mitigation. And I know you have thought a lot about how to word this policy, but I would encourage you to also think about how the policy only addresses the adaptation issue and not the combined adaptation and mitigation. And that's my only comment on this block. Thank you so much. I am really happy.
Great. Thank you, Lily. Pam, you're up next.
Hi, thank you very much. My comment is on policy 2, which was just what same comment that we submitted when we did our submissions for homework in December. It says clearly communicate how decisions are made. To whom? Is it stakeholders, to staff, to the community? I think it'd be nice to be a little bit more specific. And that's my only comment on the one so far. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pam. And the reason is clearly communicated. It's going to be a lot of different people. So the strategies will speak kind of to who the clear communication is. And we intentionally kept it kind of higher level because they're stakeholders like our bids, but there are also community members and there are also like kind of unique advocacy groups. So like as we work through the clearly communicate, it's externally, not internally, because we have our coordination policy as well. So maybe it's clearly communicated externally, but the strategies will help kind of make sure that the intent of the policy is clear.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Mike Hanna, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks. A lot of work. I appreciate really all that the community outreach work you guys have done. It's really good. My concern is more global and probably one of nomenclature. And I think we gave this comment before that these policies still read like goals. A policy, the way I guess we were thinking about it, we should be able to look at a project and say, well, that violates county policy or that's consistent with the county policy. None of these allow for that. These are all, which is, I think it's also indicative that everyone supports all these policies, right? So if the policy had teeth, you'd have people who were objecting to them, but they're all sort of goals and aspirational. We were hoping for, and I think the plan is to do these under strategies, things like anytime work is done over a bike network priority 2 section of roadway, the county will implement protected bike lanes or the equivalent. My concern is by not calling that a policy and calling it a strategy, it weakens it somewhat in that it's not, you're not violating a policy now, you're just not implementing a strategy. And we're hoping this plan provides some real guidance to staff so that you guys know what to do for individual projects. And these policies don't really do that. So that's my biggest concern.
That is what our intent for the strategies are. We did that, we would have entirely too many policies and we would just have 144 policies, which if we're going to that level of detail. So it's kind of why we're trying to step down every time, is to make sure that if you care about that policy that speaks to planning for construction and planned events, Then you go to that and you look for your strategies that are related to that, where we will have, you know, the maintenance of clear pedestrian sidewalks, of signage on detours, things like that. But if we were to let it all sit in just a list of 144 or something along those lines, it's so much harder to find the guidance you need. And that's one of the challenges we currently have with our transportation plan, is it's just kind of everywhere. So we're hoping to create kind of a logical format to all of this, so that if you care about making sure that you have those bike routes that are maintained, it's referenced under the way that we do this policy. And from our perspective, it doesn't weaken it. It just helps clarify where we look for the guidance.
Okay, well, we'll wait for the next, I guess, step to.
It's fair. We're building it right now.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just concerned that so far the entire process has been very high level, very aspirational, and year and a half in, we're still sort of talking aspirational stuff that everyone in the community agrees with. So, looking for some more teeth. That's all.
Elizabeth, you're up next.
Elizabeth.
Sorry about that. I had my mic off, was going on and on. I'm glad I'm following the fellow that just spoke, because my comments is very similar. Taken under question 2, clearly communicate how decisions are made. I am hoping that there'll be a additional set of criteria that is developed for when there are two competing priorities and lack of money to accomplish them all. How will the decisions be made? I mean, clearly you're going to look to state code compliance is one of them. How about other things? And I would like to be able to have some feedback provided in terms of how decisions are made when there's competing priorities. I think that should be developed in advance as part of clearly communicating and number 2.
I hear the comment. It's much more strategy and even beyond the transportation plan. This is kind of a higher level policy document, not the like weedy step-by-step process, but there will be kind of considerations. And that's why we have our safety as kind of that, like in that policy where we talk about safety, that it is the first priority when we think about these things. And that's kind of our ability to say that this is what we need to consider first.
Well, one of the comments that the Disability Advisory Commission made when they've been looking at the different phases is they're really pleased that pedestrian access and multimodal transportation is part of this. We were very pleased when you added a description of how accessibility includes accessibility for people with disabilities. But then one of our members said, that he has to drive to different places, and that as we get rid of parking options, how will he ensure that there are some parking options for people with disabilities who can't get places otherwise? And I could see that the curb issues are so complicated. It just seems like there's got to be some way for us to comment upon, again, conflicting priorities, how they will even be recognized. And the woman who asked about budget considerations, of course, people have to be certain that their tax dollars are used wisely, but in many cases, budget considerations are going to go against, say, some of these priorities. And again, how would that be weighed?
I think that's a great point, Elizabeth. And that's where values come in as well, is not just the financial implications, but the values that some of this works towards. So I think it's a really important flag. And then I think your point about the parking is well heard. And when we start to create those curb lane hierarchies, if there is no available parking in the area, parking is going to continue to be a priority within that area. But if there's underground parking or other types of parking available, then the curb lane use of that parking isn't as important. So like we really are kind of seeing that nuances even in the types of responses people gave us, that it's not going to, for curb lanes, be a one size fits all. It's why it's going to be a kind of decision guideline, but not a shall, because every context will be slightly different based off of the street and the land use that's surrounding a curb. So we hear it. It is going to always be a case by block, and it's why we're not going to come out with a map of what curbs are prioritized by what in a specific spot, but instead create kind of a decision matrix about what we consider because of examples exactly like what you brought up, because there's nuance, because there's the lived experience that goes into some of that decision making at that micro level.
Terrific. Terrific.
Tony, I think you're our last person on this slide.
Okay, let me try and get my hand down here. All right. So two things. So first of all, with Pam's comment, with the communicate to whom, I think you could maybe throw in some sort of catch-all language like to relevant stakeholders and staff, something like that, that kind of gets at the spirit of what you're saying while not being too specific. And then my second piece is piggybacking off the last two comments, that I think there is the sort of when the rubber meets the road sort of issue that can come up with these. And one of the issues that we ran into when I was over in working in DC government with Move DC is that sometimes, they have the 7 clearly articulated goals, but sometimes we didn't know which one came first when we were sort of prioritizing. And so like similarly to how it's done right now with the maps that we had last time, where, it was very clearly like we're prioritizing sidewalks above all else, but on certain corridors we'll put bikes, in certain corridors we'll put buses first. I think that sort of clear tier system of what generally should come first. And again, yeah, I agree with you that it's, Kristen, that it's not a thou shalt situation, but in a general recommendation for policy, Arlington should prioritize safety, for example, over other initiatives. And so I think that piece that the prior two people were speaking to is an important one.
Fair thoughts. Next slide, Chris.
Yes, please. All right, who has comments or questions about this set of policy changes? We will start with Aaron Schutz.
All right, thanks. I'm just looking at what's now called 6A. I've got a couple of things on there. First one, I don't love TDM being listed in here as part of our, I know it's a strategy, I think. I'm just afraid I look at the Route 1 plan that VDOT has to bring it down to grade level, and they're like, we'll fix it with TDM. And TDM gets cut as soon as the budget goes south. So I just don't see that as long-term as concrete. So I think building correctly is such a higher priority than saying, yes, and if we give people $5, they might bike instead of drive, or a free bus pass or something like that. So I'm just concerned about that. I'm also looking at, and this is a mathematician in me, so sorry if y'all don't agree, but the word minimize means something specific, and you guys don't mean that. You mean reduce. And I put this in my comments last month that if you just mean make less, then make less. But if you want to minimize single occupancy trips, then mandate HOV. It's that simple. But you don't mean that, you mean just make it less. So again, that's a language issue, but I feel strongly about math terms. So thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Lily, you're up.
Thank you so much. I'm also very appreciative that Policy 5 now includes affordability. That's one of our asks. So we're very happy and grateful that the change was taken on. Again, very happy about 6B. My comment goes to the fact that it does not address the transition to electric vehicles as a necessary investment and as a necessary driver of the future transportation plan, I do not think that we're going to get to carbon neutrality unless we have a policy that forces investment on EV charging infrastructure. And I would encourage the county staff to think about that and ways that we can tweak the language to include that. And even if you are bold to put a timeline, a goal on that policy, shooting for 2050 to have that shift. The reason why we are sponsoring this and advocating for it, it's because we do not think that cars are going to go away anytime soon. And the best way we can reduce emissions is to transition into electric vehicles. And we're not going to have the transition unless we have the infrastructure that is backing that transition. And that has to be tied to the way that you're planning to couple investment with the development of the system, as well as the goal on emission reduction. Sorry, I'm taking a long time, but thank you for your time and the work.
So there'll be a strategy about EV charging, either in the curbside policy or somewhere else. But we really do think it's important that we don't focus on electric vehicles here. We have the CEP. The CEP speaks to electrification of the fleet. This is about our right-of-way, how we move people. We're trying to make sure that we're encouraging people out of vehicles with this plan as much as we can, because that has so many benefits beyond just greenhouse gas emission reduction. The biggest greenhouse gas emission reduction we get is when someone chooses to walk or bike, and then when someone takes transit. And when people do that, we also see safety benefits. There's so much that is important to the transition of our right-of-way that focuses on the multimodal transportation, those high quality options for this component of the comprehensive plan. We have other elements of the comprehensive plan that we will cross-reference within the transportation plan that speaks to kind of the county's approach to electrification. That's just not this plan. So we're trying to keep it in our transportation lane of like what we provide, how we allocate right-of-way, and a way that we allocate right-of-way in a specific spot is in the curb lane and where we think about EV charging as a strategy, but it's not a global policy because it's not a transportation movement policy. So I hear you. It is important to GHG, but not in the way that the transportation plan is thinking about our GHG impact and what we can do with how we allocate right-of-way space and encourage mode shift.
Back to Aaron.
I just wanted to follow up on that. Does that mean that we might think about the focus on shifting trips to multimodal is a strategy? And among other strategies to reduce greenhouse gases, you know, I'd say I'm okay with zero emission vehicles being something that we talk about. I understand the CEP is something different, but I think it should be called out to be supportive of, or you know, in alignment with.
Can I just say something? The way that we look at this opportunity to provide feedback is to inform ourselves on the best practices that we see in other jurisdictions that are dealing with this idea of planning a transportation system that it is for the future. And the way I see it in places where you have a lot of EVs is that there are charging stations along the street where you park. And so my point to you is that if we are deciding on how that space is going to be allocated, we have to talk about infrastructure for EV, because that is going to be the future. There is going to be this transition, and this plan is going to be for 25, 30 years. And so I understand the way that you allocated the themes that you talk about, but the right of way has to do with this. And if you want, we can send some information that speaks to that. if it's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and
Just
I
to be
can just
clear, Lily, I wanted to make sure you heard that it was very clearly stated there will be strategies about EV charging at the curbside in the plan.
Yes, but a strategy is not a policy, and we had that discussion before. And what we want is to have a policy that drives the way that we assess the actions forward. That's our understanding. But again, I'm trying to provide feedback and information and a way to look at things that through the climate lens, and I know it can be very narrow. And I just wanted to be helpful
Yeah, I
because
just wanted
our
to make sure
comment comes from
you had heard that, because the second round of feedback felt like you'd missed that part of it. That's all. Cool.
No, I heard, and
Great.
all ears, and I just wanted to provide feedback based on the information I had reviewed to be able to give you this comment.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Anybody
and
else?
that's
Go ahead, Allison.
I'll just add really quick, Chris. I think that's really helpful feedback, and I think something to remember with this is we've all been focusing for the past year and a half on the new MTP, but it is just one element of the entire county comprehensive plan. And so we have complementary policies, goals in those other elements, like the community energy plan, as Kristen mentioned, and they're all designed, intended to work synergistically together. But we want to make sure that we're not repeating the same things, because they do just have very different focuses. And so that policy about vehicle electrification lives in the community energy plan. So we most likely wouldn't repeat that, just in the interest of not being redundant. But also, as Kristen mentioned, the focus with the MTP is really on the right of way and what we can achieve through making the best use of that space over time. And the best way that we, from a transportation perspective, can reduce those emissions is through that mode shift. And there is no other element of the comprehensive plan that speaks to that. So it's very important that we put a lot of energy, put a lot of strategies behind that. But as Kristen and Chris both mentioned, we will have strategies that do speak to vehicle electrification. So that will be supporting what's in the community energy plan, and we'll reference that. But it's just not going to be that same level policy, because we already have it in a different comp plan element. So just to give you a background on how this all fits together at the countywide level. But yeah, we absolutely hear the importance of that.
Right. Chris, I think we're up there, right? Already ahead of me. All right, folks, who has questions, comments on this set of policy changes and updates? Going once, going twice. Go ahead, Justin.
I was very glad to see number 10, the change to the language there, applauding that. I think the last week and a half that we've all been living maybe further emphasizes the need for that in the future, because I know it's certainly put a damper on how myself and my family are able to get around, under the current circumstances. This maybe goes beyond what happens during typical disruptions. This is a little bit out of the ordinary, but still just wanted to mention I'm really glad to see that language coming in on the latest draft policy. So thank you all for that.
Great. Big fan of 10 as well. Seeing no other hands, let's jump to the next page. Who has any thoughts, comments, feedback on, I believe this is one policy change, on the safety policy? Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, my only concern with that is you've changed it from an ongoing policy of ensuring safety to a plan to be safe. And that concerns me, that you have an issue, you don't have to address it anymore because we're not planning to change something. So I'm just not happy with that language because of that, the implications of that.
A fair critique. Our kind of perspective on initiatives is everything we do on a daily basis, like us being our existence as a, DOT within DES, anything any of us work on a daily basis is a project, a plan, or initiative. So I hear kind of the language concern, but I think based off of kind of how we understand what we do on a daily basis, it's still covered because it's ensuring safety as is the first priority in everything we do. Is still making sure that, we're ensuring the safety of people. So I hear it, but just at least from the way we approach it. And then the strategies are 100% going to speak to that too.
Yeah, that was my follow-up is your statement of explaining it kind of, well, I see that in the strategies. And last on that same thing, will I see in the strategies for this one, the push that I had made last month on maintenance, not filling potholes, but cleaning up debris and things safe and clear is the language I think I used. You see it a lot in bike lanes, including ones that never got the leaves taken out of them during the vacuum cleaning, and nobody deals with that. So there's an ongoing need in there that somehow that's got to be written out.
We heard that. We actually kind of loved the thought about it, and we really see that as a strategy under the maintain a state of good repair and service across the transportation network, because those leaves are like part of the state of good repair. Like I think you used the term clean and clear. Truly stuck with us, and
good.
We do have a intent of a home for that within the strategies.
Thank you.
All right, on to that next page. Any comments or feedback on these changes? Go ahead, Pam.
Hi, thank you very much. This is for 17 and something that the PAC cares about very deeply. I like what it says, but I want a caveat in there that it cannot impact adversely the necessary pedestrian clear zone space, because a lot of the spaces are going to be constrained, and much as we would love to have all of these things, they're not going to be on the sidewalk. Some of them can be on the curb, but there just isn't going to be room to have all of these things and give us sufficient space. So if you can do a little tweaking to that, we'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Definitely have a lot of constraints.
And John.
Yeah, the Forestry Commission has always been appreciative of number 17, as you would expect, but we would really wish that you could make a formal policy to actually reduce the amount of space given to vehicles and transportation and increase the space for people. I think we've seen with the snow that the transportation works pretty well when a significant percentage of our streets have been taken over by the snow. So I think that the wish here is that if you could indeed make a formal goal of reducing space for cars and parking and pavement and all that, and more space for people and nature. Thanks.
I hear that. I do think it's important for us to sometimes, as someone who is a strong supporter of reducing the number of vehicles on our roadways or parking or bus lanes, travel lanes in general, I think it's always important for us to remember that those people in those cars don't want more people driving by any means, but those are still people. And that we do need to make sure that we're balancing everything, and that sometimes when we choose how we phrase that, we do need to be really careful about not dehumanizing, depeopling the person that is in that car. I entirely understand the sentiment, John, but it's one of those things that we have to be very careful about as transportation planners, because there still is something that we recognize across this plan, is that we need to provide these enhanced opportunities for people to choose to walk, bike, take transit, have enjoyable spaces as they travel, that are comfortable, have wide enough clear zones, like Pam mentioned, that have the opportunity for street trees where we want them for, gathering spaces. But that we still need to make sure that people who will continue to have to drive, because sometimes life is just that way, we want to make sure that we're not othering those people that we've seen kind of have a response to that type of language in other places we've tried to use it before. So just a little context on why it's something that we as staff probably wouldn't be putting in here, because we know the type of reaction it would get from the community.
Okay, appreciate that.
All right, next page. Oh, wait, Mike, real quick on this page.
Yeah, I just want to react to that real quickly. That's a little concerning. It sounds like you're not going to put policies in place that people might object to. And I think this is the opportunity for the community to chime in. So if these policies are likely to result in, reduced vehicle travel lane widths and increased other widths, it seems like this is the opportunity for the community to chime in. But if you don't put it in front of them, they don't have the opportunity to do that. That's just a concern on my part.
I hear you, Mike. And we are definitely going to put things in front of the community and have put things in front of the community that have, been us testing the waters. We've just already experienced a number of things and have a understanding that the way we phrase things sometimes does matter. So when we talk about all of this space, it's not that it's going to be taken away from people that are moving. It's really about thinking about the right of way that we have today being used differently. And that's the important component. So that's kind of what I was pointing to for John's comment, was really that like the phrasing we use is really important, because we need to remember that people who are driving are people, that they are part of this phrasing, this transportation experience, and that we shouldn't be othering their experience, but that we want to enhance the opportunity and ability for people to do other things and rely on our policies that encourage mode shift, that provide opportunities, that give the opportunity to do other things, because that's where we find success. That is our clear path through to support. And it's making sure that people see the benefits of these enhancements and not kind of the demonization of the way they choose to travel today, because they don't have other options currently. And that's an experience that we learned from with the vision and goal statement, and specifically the vision statement. So it's really just us making sure that our intents are stated in a way that don't have a negative reaction because of what we said, instead of trying to get our intent across.
Yeah, I think it's important that we be really clear about what we are intending to do and what our priorities are, but without using language that is, inflammatory or makes people feel attacked or judged. So I think that's some of the nuance there. I've always had a little bit of a nervousness, I think probably in the direction that Mike has, that like at some point we have to be like, it's not actually a revolutionary plan if it's all sunshine and roses.
No.
So clarity without being attacking.
Yes.
Or
and
judging
we agree.
or othering.
And there will be strategies that you'll start seeing a lot more of that specificity coming in. And that is where the individual teeth start to happen.
Yeah, that's where the steel meets the rails. All right, is this the final one? I'm trying to remember.
The final one,
23. Okay.
23, technically 22 as reallocated.
Right. Go ahead, Pam.
See, my question is about 22. Says support freight and delivery operations. I find support by itself is a little weak. Perhaps say prioritize and support. Make it a little stronger.
I hear that, or even a different kind of action verb that emphasizes that we're encouraging. I don't know how many times we've used the word encourage, but basically just, we also tried to make sure that every starting word of these policies wasn't a repetition of four. But yeah, I hear that. I hear that like it should be a little bit more of an affirmative statement about what we're doing with this.
I don't think you've used prioritize yet, so that would be new. Thank you.
Maybe we haven't.
Claire, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I had maybe a question and in the context of a comment for 23. What do you envision that build out means? Does it mean to 100%? And how do you kind of, what are the parameters on that? And I'll just add, when FAC was talking about cost effective, what we actually meant by this is in the context of how much you build out these modal priority networks. Because, for example, let's say you have a road that is, 3 miles long, and you spend the money putting sidewalks on 10% of it, or periodically, or every few blocks, right? That's what you can do. But then is that useful to spend that money to get a 10% coverage if no one's actually using it because there's these breaks? So that was the example we had in our mind. And so if you could give some information about what it means to you of build out, that would be helpful.
So in general, we are going to look at these corridors. And as part of this process, we're going to identify kind of what the priority corridors are based off of the connectivity of the network. So that's kind of the context about how these will be used, is to create complete networks. So we need to build out the networks. And that may be an expensive link somewhere that is a bang for the buck, as far as like, oh my gosh, look what it does to create kind of the bicycle connectivity we need. Is it a hard and expensive lift? Yes, but it's a quarter mile and it's the place that we need to spend that money. Or it may be, 6 miles of priority boarding bus stops, because that will actually help the experience of people along that transit corridor get on the bus more easily. A pleasant experience means more people are riding. It means the bus doesn't linger by going in and out of the curb lane constantly. So building out the network is building out the network. The decisions
So
we
to
make
100%. I mean, I'm
over
trying
the
to understand.
over the course of the plan, yeah, or else these networks don't do what we need them to do. This is a high level, long range plan. It's, the big picture that eventually then gets implemented through, as I think I mentioned earlier, the CIP and how we make funding decisions long term. That's not this plan. This plan sets
Right.
that
I
big picture
understand.
vision.
Right.
It's a comprehensive plan element.
I'm trying to understand, like, is this clear? And build out the modal priority networks, it could mean different things. For example, we could spend money doing 2% every year on everything, or we could put all of the money up front, completing 100% whatever needed to happen, one network, for example, one street. And I don't know if that is something that should be reflected in this policy document of
So I think I hear you a little bit. The strategies will speak to how a little bit the modal networks are built out, why they're built out, where we make decisions. But a lot of this is a corridor by corridor decision making. It's a context, time and place. It's a prioritization of, we're also doing a gap analysis right now to look at the modal networks as a whole and see if we need to tweak anything in it, if there's gaps in access. But I think one of the things that right now we're setting the big picture. We want to make sure that we have a network that can serve people's needs. Once this plan is adopted, then we start to look at how we make decisions off of its guidance. And if a specific link is cost prohibitive right now, it means we can't do it. But if there are other links and treatments, because the other thing this plan isn't is a facilities-based plan. So we're saying what the priorities are. So if the priority network says we want to enhance the bicycle experience along a corridor, we're going to look at how we do that. But I think one of the things that I appreciate why you're asking these questions, especially from the commission you're coming from. They're important. They're time bound to a different place than we are in the planning process, because right now we are big picture. We are complete networks, and eventually we will get into the weeds once this plan is our guidance and adopted on how we make and where we fund projects.
Okay, thank you. I think it helps to clarify the complete network aspect of 23. Thank you.
Back to you, Pam.
I'm sorry, I forgot that I had a question about 23 as well. I think I know the answer. The other policy in the current pedestrian element that is not specifically included here is building out the pedestrian network. So that's going to be a strategy under 23?
So it's probably going to be a strategy under 23. And then there are also going to be kind of another section of this plan. And you guys know that this is, all an in process experience for all of us. We're going to talk about the modal networks in a subsequent meeting. We could not do everything at this meeting. None of us want to be here till 11 o'clock tonight, and we'd all be fried. But one of the things that we started talking about is we have the PPZs in the current transportation plan, right? The pedestrian priority zones that talk about where we prioritize enhancement to the pedestrian network. One of the things that we're noodling on, it's not done, we're still in process, is creating a map that kind of starts to overlay what those priority zones are and does like a priority ranking of some sort of all of the sidewalk links, whether or not they exist or not, kind of irrespective of what they are today. So it shows us like, oh my gosh, this link is in 5 different priority zones. It's built, oh great, we're good. It's built to like standards, it's ADA compliant, lovely. But if we find a location that, is in 4 pedestrian priority zones and it's a missing link, that is going to help us understand where we have those priorities within our sidewalk network that need to be completed. So it's kind of that pedestrian priority overlay for us is how we make decisions on projects and on discrete kind of intersections or programs, but it will also help us understand like when we look at these networks, if there are missing links that are high level within those specific zones, we recognize that like we don't have that same kind of map that we do for the priority networks for bicycles and micromobility and transit. And while this map will have a slightly different flavor, we recognize the need to kind of show visually where those priority areas might be for pedestrians. So it'll probably be some sort of colorization of overlays of those PPZs laid on top of each other. Not an identification maybe of missing links yet, but our way when we go to look for missing links to understand if they're in those top priority areas. Does that make sense?
That sounds great, and the PAC would very much like to help you do that. Thank you.
Yeah, really glad to hear staff is thinking about this issue because it's been in the back of my mind ever since we got going with this, and it was like, oh, pedestrians are most important. We're going to look at them everywhere, and it's like, okay, but how do we know where the important spots are to look at? Like it can't just be, oh, we'll fix for pedestrians when we go to implement the bike network or implement the transit network. So really glad to hear staff's noodling through that. Anybody else on this final slide? Comments, questions? All right, I think we're on to the next agenda piece.
So I think a lot of what we've been hearing as we've been talking about these policies is that recognition of that next piece, right? The details, the like teeth, so to say, the strategies. We are taking a multi-pronged approach to developing these. We are doing a number of listening sessions internally with all of the departments across the county and like one big group saying like, for policies, what are things that we think are important? What are strategies or themes that kind of rise to the top for you as areas of importance to work towards one of these policies? As a reminder, our strategies are kind of the like specific detail of like how we do the strategies for like the MOT policy that we've kind of talked about a little bit for, construction and planned events. Keeping accessible, clear paths for pedestrians would be one of the strategies that we see living under there. Similarly for, ensuring the bicycle network is maintained during these events. Not the specificities of kind of like ensure the protected bike lanes are complete because not all of our bicycle facilities around places that are having, MOTs done are protected bike lanes. So it would be kind of like a recognition that the networks that exist today need to be maintained as we look at these MOTs. I don't know if anybody else, Allison, Brian, want to throw out a strategy we've been thinking about for a specific policy as kind of an example. That's the one that just always resonates for me when we think about it as like a direct example of a strategy. Put them on the spot. That was my bad. Another one.
No, that's fine. I think that's a good one. And yeah, we can follow up with another example, maybe in writing.
Yeah, actually, I thought about another one for our equitably engage is kind of exactly what we did as part of the transportation plan is going to those community groups that are traditionally underrepresented in community engagement, right? Like one of our ways that we equitably engage, we'll be doing that. Like we're going to have other ones that are like continuing to translate into all 6 languages, the kind of 6-step guide. We have our using the equitable engagement guides, like things like that will be the specific strategies of how we do the work. So that's a little bit of the flavor. We will email tomorrow. Not doing it tonight. But we're going to email kind of like a worksheet for you guys for this assignment. We know everybody probably has a ton of strategies that you would like to see work towards each of these policies, but what we're trying to do is get the ones that are the most important to you so they don't get lost in the noise of long lists. Because if all of you provide us, 7 to 8 strategies for every single policy, we won't know what your top, it just all starts to jumble up. But what we would love to see is 2 strategies. You could do 1, you could do none if there's just nothing that your committee or commission thinks rises or is a priority for you. 2 strategies per policy that are most important to your commission or committee. They can be even themes. You don't have to write the explicit strategy if you don't want to, but if you want to tell us that you think, my brain is fried. I'm sorry. Surveying the community every 3 years on their satisfaction of the transportation network, or a community survey of satisfaction is a strategy that works towards our tracking of the success of our transportation project, that policy. If you think that's a strategy that you think is important, you don't have to wordsmith it perfectly, but if you have an intent, that's helpful for us to then layer in with everything we've heard from phase 2 and 3 engagement that we're like, this is lovely. These are strategies. Everything that we've been keeping lists of on the side, the conversations we're having with kind of our interdepartmental partners, we're going to bring all of this together and we are going to just mash it, boil it into these strategies that are going to support the policies. And we want to make sure there's a little bit of flavor from everybody and what you prioritize most. So that's why it's not 6, it's not 10, it's 2, so that we really know kind of what is the most important for you. We're giving you just over a month to do this. So hopefully every committee and commission has the opportunity to meet. We'll email again tomorrow with the details. You don't have to remember this verbatim. But we are really looking forward to seeing the teeth that you guys come up with, because we know it's something that we've all been waiting for. We've all been looking forward to. And it's just, we're really excited for this point that we're in. So Sunday, March 8th, we internally talked on Friday, and then I had this moment where I was like, if you send me things on Friday evening, I'm not looking at it until first thing on Monday morning. So you guys, as your community time, your free time, can work till Sunday evening, get it to us. I will start scrolling away on Monday morning. Knowing me, I may look on Saturday or Sunday. And then we're planning on having an advisory group meeting that week of March 9th. A specific date we're going to figure out. We're going to talk to Chris. We're going to look at all the commission and committee calendars, figure out what, is the sweet spot. And then at that meeting, you guys are going to kind of talk through what your strategies are. We're going to see where there's synergies, maybe where there's a disconnect, because sometimes our desires within our right of way are at a disconnect from each other because there's just only so much space. And then we are also planning on sharing information on kind of the gap analysis that we've been doing on the modal priority networks, as well as bringing out some of the information that we've been doing working on roadway classifications and typologies on the network. All will come in emails, piecemeal. You don't have to remember everything we're going to talk about today. But that's what's coming next. We are really excited. We're probably going to do another meeting in April. So just know that we're kind of officially in this creation period. So it's going to be more meetings than we'd had as we were doing the community driven process. We've got the community input, and now we're taking all of that and we're creating the distinct components of the plan. And we need you guys to come along on that journey with us. So it's going to be a lot. We know it. We appreciate your time. Everything you've shared with us thus far has made this plan better. And we know it's going to keep doing that over the next couple of months. So with that, high level, the next advisory group meeting, 11th, mid-March, you're going to share your feedback on the strategies. We're going to share priority networks and street typologies. In April, we're going to take all of the work we've been doing on strategies. I made it so long without coughing. All of the work you did on strategies, all the work other people have shared with us on strategies, and we're going to share that with you. The draft strategies to you guys in April and maybe a few other pieces of the plan, because we can't just talk about one thing or else we'd have to have another meeting in April probably. All of that leading to what we're hoping for is a community launch of the draft plan sometime in late spring, early summer, where everybody gets to see all of it come together. We anticipate we'd probably do a meeting the month before that goes out, just so everybody can see kind of what has come together. So you have a preview. That plan we're hoping to leave out for community comment for 5 or 6 weeks before we then take everything, look at the comments, integrate it, see what makes sense to change, because things keep changing and we know they will. We do really hope to still bring this to the board in the fall so that by 2027, we have a refreshed transportation plan that now guides our decision making so that we can stop talking about how we should make our decisions and start doing the work of doing it. So timeline, and I turn it back over to Chris for public comment.
All righty. I have not seen anything go by in the chat of members of the public adding their name. So if you are here and hoping to give a public comment as not a member of the advisory committee, go ahead and you can either throw your name in the chat. All right, I see Eric Goodman's name in the chat for public comment. If anybody else wants in, just go ahead and throw your name in there. And we'll start with Eric. You've got 3 minutes.
I only want to talk for a moment. Just please clarify this as far as this homework that you're talking about. Are you looking for 44 strategies, 1 for or 2 for each of the policies, or are you looking for each committee to kind of choose the policies that are most important to them and come up with 2 strategies for each of them?
No. So, I mean, you can choose to only do like 6 policies. That's fine. And I'm addressing Eric because Eric is on the pack, and I know this guidance will be helpful. It'll also come via email. Up to 2 per policy. If there's some policies that you don't feel like making strategies for, that's fine. We just don't want someone choosing the 2 policies they care about and creating 10 strategies. We want to make sure that there's an understanding of the different considerations different committees and commissions bring to what they might prioritize as strategies to support some of the policies.
Thanks for clarifying.
I was muted. Haven't seen any other names in the chat, so I think that's it for public comment. So I will just thank you all for your time this evening. It's great to see this progress on the draft policies, and look forward to working on strategies with you all in the next couple months.
Yeah.
Have a lovely night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good meeting.
Bye. Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Thanks a lot.